Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're tackling something really fascinating, maybe a bit provocative even. We've got these sources on, well, the psychology of influence.
Yeah.
But we're pushing way beyond just, everyday persuasion. We're getting into what some call the ultimate form of indirect power, seduction.
Yeah, and it's crucial for you listening to get this straight away. When we say seduction here, we're not really talking about romance or simple flirting in the way you might think. The source material we're digging into frames it as high-level strategic persuasion. It's presented as this really complex psychological art form.
Absolutely. And the goal isn't just to charm someone consciously. It's actually to bypass their logic, their rational mind, and get right into the repressed emotional core to stir up the unconscious.
That's it. One account we looked at actually calls it the feminine version of warfare.
Wow.
Yeah, or like the planning of planning the destruction of an enemy. It sounds pretty ruthless, right?
It does sound intense.
But the key thing is, its success hinges entirely on subtlety, patience, and that indirect approach.
That indirectness feels really important today, doesn't it?
Totally. I mean, we're bombarded with direct sales pitches, obvious advertising. We've all built up a kind of cynicism. Seduction, in this strategic sense, works because it's different. It's soft, it's slow, maybe even a little insidious.
So you're not hitting them over the head with it?
Not at all. You engage their imagination first.
Yeah.
You make your presence felt almost like a haunting thought they can't shake.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do it right, the target starts to, project their own fantasies, their own unmet needs onto you.
Ah, okay. So they start doing the work for you, in a way.
Exactly. That's when the strategy really takes hold.
Okay, but before we get into the masters, the success stories,
Yeah.
we really need to understand the opposite, right? The failures.
Yes, definitely. It's the benchmark. You have to know what not to do.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the anti-seducer.
Right. We all know this type, don't we? They're the cautionary tale.
Absolutely. The anti-seducer. Well, they repel people. And the fatal flaw, according to these sources, is this deep insecurity that comes out as intense self-absorption.
So they can't seduce because they're just too focused on themselves.
Precisely. Seduction demands intense focused attention on the other person.
Mm-hmm.
Their psychology, their moods, their lacks. The anti-seducer is just stuck in their own head. They can't get outside of it.
And the sources give some pretty clear, recognizable traits here. They're the ones always pestering, imposing, talking too much.
Mm-hmm. The windbag is the term used.
The windbag, yeah. They never pause to think, am I boring this person? Is this even a conversation anymore?
Nope, because they're just venting, pouring out their own anxieties, their own needs, without any real awareness of the other person.
That lack of self-awareness seems key.
It's foundational. It means when they face any ambiguity in social situations, which happens all the time, they immediately assume the worst. They see it as a slight, a rejection, a betrayal.
And how do they react?
Badly. With bitterness, complaints, maybe chasing way too hard, talking even more. They just don't realize they're pushing people away. They completely miss the cues.
So the first lesson, really, for you listening is you've got to look inward. You have to root out those anti-seductive habits in yourself.
Absolutely. If you come across as desperate, needy, demanding, if you can't control that, it's instantly repulsive. The sources are really blunt. There's no pleasure or profit in dealing with the anti-seducer.
They just don't get the basic psychology of it all.
Not at all.
Okay, so step one is self-awareness, avoiding those anti-seducer traps.
Yeah.
Step two seems to be about cultivating a specific kind of character.
Right. The architecture, you could say. We need to explore the strategic characters, the personas that define the masters of influence. Our sources identify 9 distinct types, the Siren, the Rake, the Dandy, the Coquette, the Charmer. Quite a few.
9 types, okay.
But the really critical point is that each one embodies a deep, almost intrinsic quality, something that creates this powerful, magnetic, almost hypnotic pull.
Hypnotic.
Oh.
But it's not just being likable.
No, it's stronger than that. The idea is that these characters radiate a specific kind of energy, something specialized, that taps into emotions the victim can't easily control or rationalize. And this effect, this pull, can be so strong that the target often becomes blind to the manipulations that come later. They're already drawn in.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe we can't cover all 9, but let's look at a few powerful examples to see how different these qualities can be.
Good idea. Let's start with perhaps the most archetypal female figure of seduction, the Siren.
The Siren. Instantly evocative. What's her core power?
Well, it's not just physical beauty, although that's part of the toolkit. The real strength is a calculated mix. abundant sexual energy combined with sharp psychological cunning.
So beauty plus brains, but specifically applied.
Exactly. They don't just have an appearance, they use it strategically. Adornment, makeup, voice, movement, those fleeting glimpses of flesh, it's all constructed to create an image. Sources say, a goddess come to life.
A god has come to life. That's quite the image.
It is. And the desire, it stimulates, yes, it's physical, obviously, but the sources argue that's almost a decoy.
A decoy. How so?
The deeper desire stirred up is the fantasy of actually possessing this incredible figure, of entering her world, this rarefied, intoxicating atmosphere she creates.
So the physical is the gateway to the fantasy.
Precisely. And that sensory overload, that physical allure, combined with the promise of fantasy, is what helps bypass the target's rational defenses.
Okay, let's make this concrete. Cleopatra comes to mind.
She's the perfect historical example of using this strategically. Apparently, she wasn't necessarily the most conventionally beautiful woman of her era, but she was a master of presentation, of stagecraft. She lured these incredibly powerful men, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, guys defined by the rigid masculine world of war and politics.
Right, the ultimate alpha males.
And she pulled them completely out of that world. She created this alternative reality, this feminine world of pure spectacle, luxury, refined sensory pleasure. Think music, perfumes, feasts, or dramatic entrances.
So she overwhelmed their senses and changed their context.
Completely. Caesar, who apparently usually dispatched mistresses pretty quickly, was totally captivated. But how does she maintain that power? It wasn't just the initial splash.
Good question. The novelty must wear off eventually.
That's where the psychological cunning comes in. The analysis highlights Cleopatra deliberately used patterns of hope and despair.
Hope and despair. Explain that.
Just when these powerful men felt they had her, felt secure, maybe thought they'd finally possessed her, she'd turn cold, indifferent, withdraw the warmth, the pleasure they'd started to expect.
The push and pull. Classic.
Classic, but devastatingly effective against egos like theirs. That sudden coldness, that uncertainty, it drove them nuts. It forced these rulers back into pursuit mode, desperate to win back the favor, the pleasure she'd shown them before. They became obsessed.
Emotional slaves, essentially.
Pretty much. And you see echoes of this even in modern figures. Think about Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, yeah.
Her whole persona was meticulously constructed, wasn't it? She practiced that breathy voice, that walk, hours spent perfecting the image. The sources say her presence had to reek of sex.
Strong words.
But crucially, there was always that slight distance, right? A hint of vulnerability, maybe, but also an elusiveness. She was the fantasy figure you could almost touch, but never quite fully grasp. That kept the chase alive.
Always slightly out of reach. That reinforces the fantasy.
Exactly. And it's not just about static image. Movement can be incredibly powerful, too. There's the story of Cixi, a famous Chinese siren.
She. Tell me more.
She was apparently trained specifically in suggestive, graceful movement, how to walk, how to gesture, ways that were incredibly alluring but subtle.
Trained movement.
Yes, and her movements were described as so captivating, so tremulous, that they completely obsessed King Fuchai. He became so consumed by her, by watching her, by her presence, that he neglected everything else, his kingdom, his duties.
And the kingdom fell.
It fell to his enemies, all because he was mesmerized by her highly instructed, suggestive way of moving. It's a stark example of that blend of psychological suggestion and physical allure.
Okay, so the siren uses fantasy, psychology, and strategic presentation. What about the male equivalent? You mentioned the rake.
Right, the rake. If the siren is often the ultimate female fantasy figure, the rake taps into a different kind of desire. His core power comes from his seemingly insatiable desire for women and his delightful lack of restraint.
Delightfully unrestrained. Sounds dangerous.
That's exactly the appeal. He appeals to a hidden, maybe repressed desire in the victim to touch the forbidden, the dangerous. He's devoted to pleasure, especially the pleasure of women, and seems willing to toss aside convention for it.
So he's the opposite of the safe, reliable, predictable guy.
Completely. And that risk, that devilish component, the word rake apparently comes from Raythal, is a huge part of the attraction. He offers a taste of liberation from boring social norms, a walk on the wild side, maybe vicariously.
Okay, so how does he operate? Does he hide this reputation?
No, quite the opposite. A key tactic for the rake is to embrace and even enhance his bad boy reputation. He needs to be seen as irresistible to women, devoted to pleasure, maybe a bit scandalous. If he seems tameable, the fantasy loses its power.
Interesting. So the reputation precedes him and helps him.
Massively. And he often plays on another powerful fantasy, the desire of the victim to be the one who finally tames him.
The I can change him fantasy.
Exactly. Think of famous figures known for their affairs, like Lord Byron, or maybe even some political figures people point to, like Bill Clinton. Part of the allure is the challenge. Women are drawn to the idea that they have the unique power to reform this charming rogue.
So he almost plays up his weakness.
Sometimes, yes, he might present himself as almost a victim of his own insatiable desires, unable to help himself. This vulnerability paradoxically makes women want to indulge him, protect him, forgive him. It's quite a maneuver.
Turning vice into a vulnerability. Yeah, that's clever.
Okay.
Okay, one more type. You mentioned the dandy. They sound different again.
Very different. The dandy offers allure based on ambiguity and self-creation. They refuse to be easily categorized.
How so?
They create their own fluid persona, often playing with masculinity and femininity. There's an androgynous quality, a striking aesthetic sense, but it's unique to them. They aren't following trends, they are the trend.
And why is that attractive?
The sources suggest it's because most people feel trapped, right? Trapped by gender roles, jobs, social expectations. The dandy seems to embody a kind of freedom from all that, a freedom others secretly crave.
They represent escape, but through self-invention rather than just breaking rules like the Rake.
Precisely. They are meticulous about their appearance, their style always aesthetic, never vulgar, and crucially, they seem utterly uninterested in what anyone else thinks or does. They have this supreme self-possession.
It's a confidence thing, though.
A very specific kind of cool, detached confidence. The example of Rudolph Valentino is fascinating here.
The silent film star.
Yes. He thrilled audiences, particularly women, because he blended traditional masculinity with traits women often saw as feminine patience, attentiveness, a certain gentleness in courtship. This combination felt unique, sensitive, deeply alluring.
So is the ambiguity the blend?
Exactly. But it had to be the right blend. The sources mention that when Valentino played a character who was just a total fop, overly effeminate, in a film called Monsieur Beaucaire, it apparently flopped.
So the masculinity still needed to be there.
It seems so. The appeal was the man who was strong and decisive, but also willing to woo slowly, attentively, like a more traditionally feminine approach might. That perfect balance, combined with his flawless, self-contained style, made him magnetic.
Okay, so we have these distinct characters, the Siren, the Rake, the dandy, setting a kind of magnetic stage. But seduction isn't just about having a captivating personality, is it? It's a process.
Absolutely. It's a long game. Our sources stress patience, focus, strategic thinking over time. The goal isn't just to attract, it's to keep the victim. Well, constantly off balance, surprised, and increasingly dependent.
Which brings us nicely into, I guess, section 2, tactical mastery. How do they actually do that?
Right. Let's dig into the mechanics of creating confusion and dependence. And a prime example of this is the strategy employed by the coquette.
The coquette. Sounds like a flirt, but I'm guessing it's more strategic than that?
Much more. The coquette's core strategy is devastatingly simple, really, and timeless. Never offer total satisfaction.
Never give them what they fully want.
Exactly. Because, think about it, an easy conquest loses value almost instantly. We get excited by what's denied, what we have to strive for, not what's just handed to us.
The thrill of the chase.
Fundamentally, the coquette masters this by constantly alternating hot and cold, warmth and coolness, presence and absence.
How does that work psychologically?
It taps right into our innate insecurities. When the coquette suddenly withdraws, becomes distant, seems uninterested, the target immediately feels anxious. They fear they're losing favor, losing the connection.
And that fear makes them work harder.
Instantly. It heightens their desire, makes them focus intensely on winning back the warmth. They start pursuing more aggressively.
Okay, example time. Who embodies this?
The sources point to Josephine and Napoleon as a classic case study, even within their marriage.
Really? After they were married?
Apparently so. When Napoleon was away on his military campaigns, Josephine's, let's say, occasional indifference or her slight coldness would drive him absolutely wild.
He'd be conquering Europe but worrying about her.
Exactly. He'd spend hours writing these frantic, passionate letters, pouring out his heart, desperate for her reassurance, obsessed with her perceived coolness. He was completely hooked on trying to fully possess her spirit, which she cleverly never quite allowed.
Wow. His immense power in the world meant nothing in that dynamic.
It seems not. He couldn't conquer her emotionally, and that became his fixation.
It's not just romantic either, is it? This hot-cold dynamic.
Not at all. Think about Andy Warhol. He wasn't necessarily being romantically coquettish, but he mastered a kind of social and artistic coolness.
How did he do that?
He cultivated this public persona that was elusive, non-committal. That blank stare, the monosyllabic answers, the refusal to explain his art or himself fully.
Right, the whole mysterious vibe.
Exactly. And that emotional distance, that refusal to give easy answers, created a kind of vacuum. People needed to know what he meant, what he felt.
So they rushed in to fill the void.
Precisely. Critics, followers, other artists. The sources say people would go mad to win your favor. They'd project their own interpretations, their own desires, their own heat onto his cool surface, desperate for some sign of validation from him.
So the coquette's power is kind of a disciplined narcissism. Self-contained, offering just enough warmth to keep you hooked.
That's a good way to put it. They're maddening because they never fully commit, but they also never fully reject. You're kept perpetually hoping, perpetually off balance.
Okay, that's one tactic for confusion. What else? You mentioned targeting deeper wounds.
Yes. Moving beyond just manipulating presence and absence, there's a strategy aimed at something much deeper. Creating the illusion of the ideal lover.
The ideal lover. Sounds ambitious.
It is. This goes way beyond simple flattery. It requires the seducer to become incredibly attuned to the victim. You have to figure out really deeply what's missing in their life, what disappointment haunts them, what dream did they let go of.
And then you become that dream.
You appear to be the fulfillment of that lack, yes. You embody the solution to their deepest dissatisfaction.
Is there a term for this?
It's sometimes called creating an ego-ideal regression. The power comes from mirroring back to the target their ideal self, or some lost quality they yearn for, maybe something from childhood even.
Something innocent or full of promise?
Often, yes. And when this works, the connection feels incredibly profound to the victim. It feels lofty, aesthetic, not really about sex, as the sources put it. It feels like finding a missing piece of themselves.
Who managed this effectively?
Madame de Pompadour with King Louis XV is the classic example.
The French king. What was his lack?
Chronic, soul-crushing boredom. Not just needing entertainment, but a deeper existential ennui. His previous mistresses apparently only catered to his sensual side, and the novelty wore off fast.
Okay, so Pompadour diagnosed something deeper.
Exactly. She figured out his real issue was his crushed ideals about being a great king. Louis XV wanted to be magnificent, impactful, but maybe lacked the confidence or drive.
So she didn't just distract him, she propped up his ego.
More than that, she actively cured his incessant bouts of boredom by constantly staging fantasies, yes, but fantasies that reflected greatness, new costumes, luxurious settings, stimulating talk about art, philosophy, even war strategy.
Making him feel involved in things that mattered?
Precisely. She held up a mirror, but it was a magic mirror. In it, he didn't just see himself. He saw the great man he yearned to be, a cultured leader, a man of taste and intellect.
By making him feel his own potential greatness through her.
She became indispensable. She connected with his deepest, unfulfilled ego ideal. She wasn't just a mistress. She was the key to his self-worth.
That's powerful, that deep identification.
It creates incredible emotional bonds. And this leads logically to the ultimate technique for psychological confusion. Actually blurring the lines between desire and reality.
Confusing desire and reality. How did that work?
Well, people live in daydreams a lot of the time, don't they? We all construct internal fantasies to compensate for mundane reality or disappointment.
Sure, escapism.
The seducer's job here is to weave such a compelling illusion that the target starts to believe that through the seducer, they can actually live out those repressed wishes for adventure, romance, success, whatever it is they secretly crave.
So you make the daydream seem real, with you as the key.
Exactly. The illusion has to become more compelling, more real feeling than actual reality. And when that happens, the target's reason just evaporates.
Is there an example of this going maybe disastrously wrong for the victim?
Oh, absolutely. The famous tragic story of the Cardinal de Rohan and the diamond necklace affair. It's just textbook.
Okay, refresh my memory on that one.
Right. So Cardinal de Rohan, a very powerful churchman and courtier, was obsessed with gaining the favor of Queen Marie Antoinette. but she actually despised him.
An unrequited ambition.
Totally. He was desperate for any sign, any hint that she might secretly return his admiration or at least accept him into her inner circle.
Prime target for manipulation.
You got it. Enter a clever swindler, the Countess de la Motte Valois. She saw Rohan's desperation and knew exactly how to play it.
What did she do?
She started feeding him forged letters, supposedly from the Queen, hinting at secret missions and growing regard. Then she even arranged a brief nighttime meeting in the gardens of Versailles.
With the Queen.
With a prostitute paid to impersonate the Queen in the darkness. Just for a moment to murmur a few words.
No way. And he bought it.
Completely. His desire for the fantasy to be true was so overwhelming, his reason was just gone. He was blinded by hope.
So what was the end game for the Countess?
The necklace. She convinced Rohan that the Queen secretly wanted him to act as an intermediary to buy the most incredibly expensive diamond necklace ever made. He'd guarantee the payment. The Queen would secretly pay him back.
Oh, dear.
He fell for it hook, line, and sinker, mortgaged himself to the hilt, got the necklace for the Countess, who promptly had it broken up and sold. And when the whole scam inevitably came crashing down, Rohan was ruined. His reputation destroyed, career over. All because the illusion felt more real than reality.
Wow. The power of wanting to believe.
It's immense, and seducers often facilitate this by inviting the target into a kind of shared role play, setting things up like a play or a movie scene where the target gets to be the star.
Like Pauline Bonaparte, Napoleon's sister.
Yes, great example. She wanted to seduce a German officer. Instead of just inviting him over, she orchestrated this whole theatrical event. A secret summons being led through a series of magically lit exotic rooms.
Building the suspense.
Exactly. And then her entrance was apparently designed to be ethereal, almost like a goddess appearing. The whole thing was constructed as this erotic, dreamlike play, and he was the leading man invited into her magical world. By acting out the fantasy, she made it real for him in that moment.
Okay, we've seen the power of seductive characters and these psychological tactics like hot-cold, idealization, and blurring reality. But how do you even start? You can't just use these tactics on anyone, surely.
No, absolutely not. That brings us to Section 3, targeting and escalation. The sources are really clear. Successful seduction isn't random. It requires careful victim selection.
Victim selection. Sounds calculating.
It is. The underlying idea, or victim theory as it's sometimes called, is that everyone fundamentally feels some kind of gap. A lack, a void, something missing that makes them feel incomplete.
Everyone feels incomplete.
To some degree, yes, according to this view. The seducer's first job is to identify that specific lack in a potential target. Because someone who is genuinely, completely content, well, they don't have that psychological hook, that entry point for seduction.
So you're looking for unhappiness, isolation.
Exactly. Someone who's isolated, unhappy, bored, stuck in a rut. They are much more receptive. They have a void that needs filling.
Okay, so what kind of voids are particularly good targets?
Well, the sources highlight a couple of prime types. First, there's the exotic fetishist.
Exotic fetishist. What defines them?
These are people trapped in, well, banal circumstances. A boring job they hate, a small town they feel stifled by, maybe a really predictable, dull relationship. They dream of escape, of difference, of excitement. They fetishize the exotic.
So the seducer needs to appear exotic to them.
Precisely. You position yourself as the outsider, the stranger, the one who represents everything their current life isn't. You embody change, difference, glamour, escape.
Like Don Juan.
Perfect example. When he'd encounter, say, a simple village girl, his technique wasn't just flattery. He'd subtly, or not so subtly, make her feel her own life was horribly provincial compared to his world. His fancy clothes, his worldly stories, his sophisticated manners.
He made himself seem like the gateway to a better life.
Exactly. The seduction wasn't just about him, it was about the escape he represented. She wasn't just falling for Don Juan, she was falling for the idea of leaving her boring village behind.
Okay, that makes sense. What's another key target type?
The idol worshiper.
An idol worshiper. These sound like people looking for a hero.
Very much so. These are often individuals with quite active, imaginative minds, but they might also suffer from low self-esteem. They aren't looking for an equal partner. They're searching for someone to look up to, someone to idealize, someone onto whom they can project all their highest values. A savior figure, almost.
So they want someone to worship. How does the seducer handle that? Do you flatter them back?
No. That's the crucial mistake here. The sources say you must not worship the idol worshiper.
Why not? Seems counterintuitive.
Because if you praise them lavishly, it clashes with their own low self-image. It feels false, insincere, maybe even manipulative to them. They know they're not perfect.
Ah, so you have to maintain the pedestal they put you on.
Exactly. You need to remain slightly distant, superior, embodying the ideal they're projecting onto you. You have to be the clean slate for their worship. Your perceived superiority is actually what gives them a sense of purpose, having found someone worthy of their devotion.
That's a tricky dynamic. Okay,
Yes.
so you've chosen your victim, you've maybe started applying some tactics, but doubts can creep in, right? Is this person really sincere?
Absolutely. Words, flattery, even creating illusions, they only go so far. Eventually, the target might start questioning your motives. This is where the next step comes in. You have to prove yourself.
Prove yourself. How?
The sources insist on one well-timed action that shows how far you are willing to go. It needs to be something dramatic, maybe self-sacrificing, chivalrous, an act that overwhelms their lingering doubts with a sudden rush of emotion.
So a grand gesture.
A grand gesture, yes, but one that clearly demonstrates your commitment to them. It has to feel like you're putting their needs or safety above your own pride or comfort.
You can't worry about looking silly.
Not at all. Any awkwardness is instantly forgiven if the gesture is bold enough and clearly made for their sake. It has to scream, I would do anything for you.
Is there a story that illustrates this? Maybe the danger of failing this test?
Oh, the story of Lancelot and Queen Guinevere from Arthurian legend is the ultimate cautionary tale here. It's incredibly precise psychologically.
Okay, Lancelot, the great knight. How did he fail?
So the story goes, Guinevere was abducted. To rescue her, Lancelot had to endure the ultimate shame for a night, riding in a common peasant's cart, suffering insults and mockery along the way, a huge sacrifice of his knightly pride.
Okay, sounds like proof enough.
You'd think. But when he finally rescues her, Guinevere is inexplicably cold towards him, refuses him any thanks or warmth. Lancelot is baffled and hurt.
Why was she cold? He did rescue her.
Later, when he confronts her, she reveals the reason, and it's devastatingly subtle. She says, roughly paraphrased, because you delayed for 2 steps before getting into the cart.
2 steps, that's it.
That was it. He hesitated. For just a moment, maybe 2 steps worth of time, his knightly pride battled with his love and duty. That tiny hesitation showed his unwillingness, however brief, to sacrifice his status completely and immediately for her.
Wow. So the proof has to be instant, total, unambiguous.
According to this logic, yes. The highest proof of love, the ultimate seductive act of proof, is total self-sacrifice, without a moment's hesitation for pride or self-interest. Lancelot failed because he hesitated for just 2 steps. The ideal seducer, in this model, must be bolder.
Okay, so you've chosen the victim, applied tactics, proven yourself, they're hooked. What's the end game? How do you close the deal, so to speak?
Right, the final stage, inducing frenzy and accelerating the finish.
Yeah.
They're psychologically ensnared, confused, maybe addicted to the emotional roller coaster, but you still need to handle the climax carefully.
You don't just rush in.
No. Paradoxically, just when they seem completely yours, you need to execute the final retreat.
Retreat. Now why?
Because you need to hold back. By pulling away slightly at this critical moment, you create intense anxiety. You make them fear they might lose you after all this. It forces them to become the aggressor, to make the final move.
Ah, so they have to pursue you for the final capture.
Exactly. If you rush the climax yourself, you lose that final intensification of tension. You want them to feel like they are the one making the decisive move to possess you, driven by their own will, their own desperation. That way, they feel ownership over the final surrender.
They trap themselves, essentially.
In a way, yes, they become fully complicit in their own seduction.
Okay, so how do you know when to stop retreating and, well, move forward? How do you time that final move?
The sources, particularly drawing from French libertine literature, talk about recognizing the moment, the critical, irreversible point of surrender.
And how do you recognize it? What are the signs?
It's about watching for involuntary physical cues, signs that their internal defenses have finally collapsed. Blushing, maybe a trembling in their voice or hands, unexpected tears, or even just a visible, sudden relaxation in their posture or movements.
So physiological signs of emotional overwhelm.
Exactly. These are signals that their rational mind, their moral scruples, have been temporarily short-circuited by the emotional intensity.
And that's when you act.
That's when you move. Swiftly, decisively. No hesitation now. You don't give them time for second thoughts or for those rational defenses to come back online.
It needs to feel inevitable.
Yes, and like a release. The metaphor used is often a summer storm. You build up all this tension, this psychological electricity, and pressure the calm before the storm. Then suddenly the wind picks up, the lightning flashes, the rain pours down. The physical culmination should feel like that, a great, almost cathartic release after the long buildup of tension.
A release and a complete surrender.
That's the goal of this final phase.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a lot of ground here. From the anti-seducer to specific archetypes like the Siren and Rake, through tactics like hot, cold, and illusion, targeting, proof, and finally this intense endgame. It's quite a psychological landscape.
It really is. If we try to boil it down, the core takeaways seem to be that seduction, in this strategic sense, is fundamentally about controlling attention.
Controlling where they focus their mind.
Yes, and mastering the psychological moment, knowing when to push, when to pull back, when to create illusion, when to offer proof, and that constant oscillation you mentioned. Pleasure and pain, closeness and distance.
You saw that clearly with the Siren's hope and despair and the coquette's hot and cold tactics.
Exactly. And we saw how the Rake and the dandy use a kind of infectious aura, the Rake's dangerous freedom, the dandy's aesthetic self-sufficiency to create that initial powerful pull.
And the contrast with the anti-seducer is stark, isn't it? It all comes back to self-awareness versus self-absorption.
Absolutely. The seducer in this model needs incredible self-awareness, confidence, patience. They have to get outside their own head and essentially play the victim's mind like an instrument. The anti-seducer is trapped inside their own needs and insecurities, making them repulsive.
So to wrap this up, the source material we explored offers quite a provocative final thought, doesn't it? Something that goes beyond the tactics and hits at a deeper aspect of human nature.
It really does. The analysis suggests something quite profound, maybe even a bit bleak, about why people are susceptible to being seduced in the first place. It proposes that the predisposition to fall deeply in love, or perhaps become intensely infatuated, often originates in an extreme depression and inability to find something that has value in everyday life.
Wait, so falling in love stems from depression, or a lack of value in life? That's quite a statement.
It is. It reframes the whole thing. The argument continues that the real symptom indicating susceptibility isn't necessarily a healthy desire for connection, but rather a profound sense of being worthless and of having nothing that is valuable.
A sense of inner poverty, almost?
Exactly, a deep feeling of lack.
Okay, so if that's true, if the ability to be seduced relies on this underlying feeling of worthlessness or emptiness.
And the seducer's goal, as we've discussed, is basically to step into that void and fill it with an illusion, the fantasy of the ideal lover, the exciting escape, the Rake you can reform.
Then what does that tell us about ourselves? About human motivation in general?
That's the provocative question, isn't it? Are we, at our core, driven more by our unmet needs, our hidden feelings of inadequacy and lack, than by our conscious, stated desires for things like happiness or achievement?
Are we always trying to fill a hole rather than build something positive?
It certainly makes you think. What deep, maybe repressed voids might you, listening now, be unconsciously projecting onto the people you admire, the goals you chase, the things you desire?
Is your drive truly about gain? Or is it fundamentally about compensating for a sense of lack you might not even be fully aware of?
A challenging thought to leave you with.
Definitely something to...
Deeper, much more complex.
Oh, absolutely. It's not just about being charming. We're talking about, well, a subtle but incredibly powerful tool. Psychological warfare, almost.
Used everywhere, too. Romance, sure, but also in social climbing, business, and maybe most interestingly, in politics. Mass influence.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. Our mission here is to really get under the hood, forget the surface stuff. We're looking at the strategies, the long history behind how these techniques evolved.
Over centuries, really.
Millennia, even. And crucially, these 9 specific psychological archetypes. The patterns that make seduction work, time and time again.
And we should probably start with the word itself, shouldn't we? Seduction. Where does it come from?
It's key. The Latin origin, seducer. It literally means to lead astray.
To lead astray. Not just attract, but divert someone from their path.
Precisely. The objective isn't just, getting someone interested. It's about using pleasure, using fantasy, hitting those psychological buttons.
Until they just give in.
Exactly. Inducing a kind of surrender, clouding their ability to think rationally. You're not winning an argument. You're changing their whole mental direction, making them dependent.
Okay, so if it's about exploiting weaknesses, let's start there, the psychological roots. Why are we, as, thinking adults, so vulnerable to being? Well, led astray like this?
Well, the sources all seem to converge on one really big idea, a fundamental premise. It's basically this: nobody in this world feels whole and complete.
That feeling, like something's missing, that resonates.
It's universal, and the seducer, their success hinges entirely on that feeling.
So it's not just a minor flaw, it's deeper, like a fundamental emptiness.
Yes. Sources talk about a gap in their character or an inner void, something people feel they just can't fill on their own, and not through work, not through everyday life.
And that's the prerequisite. You have to feel that void first.
Absolutely critical. A perfectly satisfied person cannot be seduced.
Yeah.
There has to be some underlying discontent, some unhappiness, maybe just a feeling of being stuck.
So anxiety, maybe boredom, those are the entry points.
They're the precursors to desire, exactly. The seducer doesn't really create the need from scratch. They just recognize it and step in to become the solution.
That sounds, well, it sounds almost predatory, taking advantage of someone when they're down.
It can certainly look that way. And sometimes, the sources suggest, really intense infatuation is linked to deeper issues. Things like extreme depression or a real inability to find meaning in daily life.
So if you feel worthless.
Right. If you have that deep-seated feeling of worthlessness and then someone comes along and focuses this intense, personalized desire just on you.
They're basically giving you your value back.
They seem like it, yeah. They feel like a lifeline, a savior.
Yeah.
It makes them almost impossible to resist because they seem to fill that exact void you feel so keenly.
And talking about value, that brings us straight to vanity, doesn't it? Self-esteem.
Hugely important. It's a primary weakness. Most people project confidence, right? But underneath that mask,
Fragile egos.
incredibly fragile, very easily bruised. Seducers know this. They aim right for it. People have this deep craving for individualized attention. Attention that makes them feel special, validated in a way their normal life doesn't provide.
The sources mentioned something specific here about gender dynamics.
They did. The material notes that women, historically perhaps, often carry this feeling of being never quite felt desired and appreciated enough for who they uniquely are, especially once adult responsibilities kick in.
So the seducer provides that specific, focused appreciation.
Yes, unlike a partner who might take them for granted, the seducer makes that appreciation their entire mission. But it's not just vanity. There's also the angle of our broken dreams.
Broken dreams, how does that fit in?
Think about it. Everyone has those youthful ideals, right? Grand romance, thrilling adventures, maybe high-minded spiritual goals.
Yeah, life tends to knock those down a bit.
Exactly. They get shattered or worn down with age. Seduction thrives on that disappointment. The seducer offers this powerful illusion that through them, you can finally live out those lost fantasies.
Wow, so they're not just offering a future, they're offering to fix your past,
Yeah.
to let you reclaim that lost self.
That's the hook. And that's when the target becomes incredibly vulnerable, because it feels like destiny, like regaining something essential that was stolen by time or circumstance.
So it's about lack, about filling voids, but sometimes the vulnerability isn't about what's missing, it's about needing relief.
That's the third major point, the desire for escape. Let's face it, modern life can feel oppressive.
Responsibility, routine.
The constant demand to be rational, sensible, orderly. People feel boxed in, so they constantly seek escape in fantasies and dreams.
And the sources say the biggest lack is
Excitement and adventure. That's what they pinpoint. People are secretly dying to be overwhelmed, to be pushed past their everyday limits. Just the hint of intense pleasure of something different acts like a powerful magnet,
pulling them off the sensible path.
often making them ignore blinking red warning lights, yes, because the promise of excitement is so strong.
And going past limits often means breaking rules,
So,
crossing lines.
Which leads to the pull of transgression. It's incredibly powerful. We might not admit it, but there's a fascination with exploring our dark side,
the forbidden.
the forbidden, the dangerous, maybe even things that feel slightly evil. Leading someone past those fundamental taboos, whether social or personal, is described as immensely seductive.
And once you start down that path,
It generates its own momentum. The thrill of transgression makes it very hard to turn back. The promise of danger is a huge part of breaking down rational controls.
Okay, and there was one more vulnerability mentioned, something almost backward-looking. The yearning for childhood.
It sounds surprising, but it's psychologically deep. It connects to security. Adults often secretly romanticize childhood as this golden paradise, a time without burdens.
And they miss that feeling of being taken care of.
Deeply. That security, that dependency on a protective parent figure. Seduction can tap into this. The seducer can play one of two roles.
Either the helpless child needing care.
Right. Making the target feel strong and needed. Or they become the all-knowing, all-protecting parent figure themselves, offering complete safety and guidance.
It's like offering a safe space to regress, to let go of adult pressures.
Exactly. It creates this intense intimacy and breaks down typical adult defenses.
Before we move to history, can we just quickly touch on those gender-specific vulnerabilities again? The sources seemed quite specific.
Yes, they drew some traditional distinctions. For men, the primary vulnerability was identified as being highly vulnerable to the visual.
So appearances matter more.
Traditionally, yes. Men, often feeling the weight of responsibility, are seen as susceptible to a siren figure who offers this total escape, a visual and emotional release into a realm of pure pleasure, often tinged with risk and danger, which appeals to that need for adventure we talked about.
Okay, and for women, the key was different. It was language.
Language and words. That was pinpointed as the crucial weakness. The sources say women can be bewitched by them. Because of that longing for validation and connection, they can be dominated by seductive language.
How does that work?
Seductive language comforts insecurities, fills their ears with exactly what they want to hear, wraps them in promises of devotion or appeals to their ideals. It's about creating an enveloping fantasy through words.
So, visual fantasy for men, linguistic fantasy for women, as traditional vulnerabilities.
That's the classic framework outlined, and it really shaped how seduction strategies developed over time.
Okay, so knowing these vulnerabilities, let's trace the history. Because seduction wasn't always seen as a male pursuit, was it?
Not at all. What's really fascinating is that the sources argue seduction was essentially invented by women, born out of a need for power in societies where power meant brute force.
So when physical strength ruled.
Exactly. Clever women facing oppression, figures like, Cleopatra, Helen of Troy, they couldn't compete with force directly, so they developed seduction as a different kind of power, an indirect but lasting form of influence. They learned to substitute skill for force.
And this is where we get the Siren archetype, like Aphrodite.
Precisely. That's the prototype.
Yeah.
These early female seductresses mastered the art of appearance, meticulous adornment, creating a spectacle, projecting this almost godlike, unreal aura.
It wasn't just about attraction then, it was psychological manipulation from the start.
Absolutely. Psychological warfare. They drew powerful men in, making them desire not just sex, but the intoxicating feeling of possessing this fantasy figure. They'd lure them away from the masculine world war, politics, into this feminine realm of pleasure and spectacle.
And then, once the man was hooked.
Then came the crucial move. They'd turn cold and indifferent.
Ah, the push and pull, creating insecurity.
Exactly. This sudden coldness acted as a psychological trap. It confused powerful men, think Mark Antony with Cleopatra, or even Julius Caesar, and forced them into this desperate, almost obsessive pursuit.
Making them emotional slaves.
That's the term used. Their power was psychological, indirect, cunning, based entirely on keeping the target uncertain, always chasing.
And for a long time, men weren't really playing this game, aside from maybe a few exceptions.
Largely, no. Male power was too direct, too based on force or status. The exceptions were figures like Ovid, the Roman poet writing about love, or much later the medieval troubadours.
What did the troubadours do differently?
They were really the first to develop a male seductive technique focused purely on emotion. They mastered showing vulnerability, writing incredibly elaborate poems, acting totally devoted, almost slavishly to the women they admired. They had to earn the right to love through emotional performance, not just demand it.
Okay, but then things changed dramatically. The 17th century. What happened? Why did men suddenly get interested in these, feminine tactics?
The sources suggest it was a reaction to shifting social dynamics. Women in the European courts were gaining more agency, more power to resist simple commands or arrangements. Men needed more sophisticated tools.
So they started borrowing from the female playbook.
Exactly. The first famous male seducers, figures who inspired characters like Don Juan or the Duc de Lauzun, started adopting methods that were traditionally female, dazzling with their appearance, elaborate clothing, even learning how to play the aloof coquette.
But they added something new, right? A masculine element.
Yes, and this is a game changer. Seductive language. Soft words, eloquent persuasion, used as a distinctly masculine weapon.
Aimed right at that female vulnerability to words we discuss.
Precisely. It proved incredibly effective against female resistance. The Rake archetype, like the Duc de Richelieu, perfected this. His language was elegant, yes, but also carried this undercurrent of danger, of forbidden pleasure. It stirred those repressed longings.
So by the 18th century, the lines are blurring. Tactics are crossing over.
Completely. You see someone like Casanova, a man famous for his meticulous attention to clothes and appearance, classic Siren territory.
And women using male tactics.
Absolutely. Think of Ninon de l'Enclos, the famous courtesan. She charmed men not just with beauty, but with her sharp wit, her philosophical conversation, leveraging the power of language in a way previously associated with male seducers.
Once these techniques were detached from gender, did they start being used outside of romance?
Yes, that was the next big evolution. As the old feudal order declined, seduction adapted for social and professional gain. Courtiers in places like Versailles used psychological games, flattery, strategic coquetry, all to climb the ladder without resorting to open conflict.
Which sets the stage for political seduction on a grand scale.
That really took off in the 19th century. Leaders like Napoleon didn't just see themselves as generals, they consciously acted as mass seducers.
How did they do that? What feminine strategies did they use?
They staged huge public spectacles, used dramatic theatrical gestures, and cultivated this intense, almost sexualized physical presence. That focus on presence, on performance, on emotional manipulation, that's the core of modern political charisma.
Which leads us right up to today, the ultimate point, the sources call it, where overt force is frowned upon and influence is key.
We live in the era of the soft sell. Seduction is everywhere, often industrialized. Think advertising, social media, it all works through subliminal suggestion, insinuation.
Tapping into those same old vulnerabilities, the void, the need for validation, escape.
Constantly. The platform shifts from a palace courtyard to a smartphone screen. But the fundamental goal, it hasn't changed since the Romans defined it. It's still about engaging fantasy, clouding reason, and ultimately to lead astray.
Okay, we've set the stage with the psychology and the history. Now let's dive into the real mechanics, the 9 seductive archetypes. This feels like the core of the how-to.
Absolutely. These archetypes are the specific roles, the masks, the techniques seducers use. And they work because each one is precision engineered to target a specific kind of vulnerability, a particular unmet need.
Think of them as customized keys for different psychological locks.
That's a perfect analogy. Each archetype reflects a different fantasy back at the target.
Right, let's start with the original, the classic, the Siren.
The Siren, described as the ultimate male fantasy figure. Her technique is all about presence, creating this heightened, almost intoxicating, sexually charged atmosphere.
So physicality is key.
Very much so. Meticulous attention to appearance, adornment, makeup, fashion, anything to achieve what the sources call a goddess effect. She needs to seem slightly unreal, elusive, a fantasy brought to life.
And there's an element of danger.
Crucial. That hint of risk, of unpredictability, appeals directly to men who feel burdened by predictability and responsibility. It promises escape.
So she offers this complete release. What's the psychological impact on the target?
It's profound. She transports him to a realm of pure sensation, pure pleasure, an escape from the mundane. It works on very basic emotions, bypassing logic. Strong, rational men can become, as the sources put it, childish slaves.
Driven purely by the need to possess this fantasy.
Compelled into a feverish pursuit, they lose control, which paradoxically fulfills that hidden desire to just let go of the burdens of rational masculinity.
Okay, let's flip the coin. The Rake, the ultimate female fantasy, according to the sources.
The Rake's defining trait is intense, almost overwhelming desire, directed solely and unmistakably at the woman. His primary weapon, words.
That demonic power of words we mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Language carefully crafted to flatter, to hypnotize, to stir up deep emotions. He doesn't hide his potentially amoral nature. He embraces it. He conveys risk, darkness, the thrill of the forbidden.
And resistance just fuels him.
But he thrives on it. Obstacles, hesitations, he interprets them as challenges, spurs to intensify his devotion, his pursuit, his dramatic declarations.
But wait, if he's so openly amoral, maybe even dangerous, why does that work? Why doesn't logic kick in?
Because the sheer intensity of his focused desire is intoxicating. It feels incredibly flattering. His words are designed to bypass logic, to hit those repressed longings for something forbidden, something exciting, something society tells women they shouldn't want.
He makes her feel uniquely desired.
Uniquely capable of inspiring this level of passion. It fulfills that deep need for individual appreciation we talked about, drowning out the rational alarms. He makes her feel, in that moment, that he exists only for her.
Okay, moving to a different strategy. The ideal lover. This sounds less about intensity, more about precision.
Precision is a good word, surgical, almost. The ideal lover is an observer first. Their technique is to watch closely, listen intently, to figure out what is missing in the target's life, what youthful dreams got crushed, what disappointments linger.
And then they become the answer to that specific lack.
Exactly. They mirror that exact fantasy back at the target. If the target secretly yearns for high romance, the ideal lover provides it. If it's adventure, they embody it. Spiritual connection, they offer that too. They create the perfect illusion of fulfillment.
And they elevate it, right? Make it seem more than just romance.
Yes, they appeal to the target's better selves. They frame the relationship, even the sensual aspects, as something lofty, spiritual, aesthetically profound, necessary for the target's soul.
So the relationship becomes essential to the target's identity, their sense of self-worth.
Precisely. It fills that void left by those broken, youthful ideals. The target feels elevated, understood, like they're finally achieving their true potential. They project their deepest hopes onto the seducer, seeing them as the key to becoming their ideal self.
Then there's the coquette, the master of playing hard to get.
It's more sophisticated than just playing hard to get. The coquette is the master of delaying satisfaction. Their core technique is this constant, calculated back and forth, hot and cold, offering hope, then snatching it away.
Creating confusion and anticipation.
Exactly. They cultivate an aura of elusiveness, distance. They seem self-sufficient, detached, like they don't need the target. This selective withdrawal keeps the victim constantly off balance, guessing, intrigued.
And they use jealousy.
Often, yes. Allowing rivals to appear, making the target feel insecure and compelled to work harder for their attention.
You mentioned people get addicted to this coldness. Why? Why does being treated poorly sometimes intensify desire?
It's a harsh psychological dynamic. The delay makes the eventual reward seem infinitely more valuable because it was so hard won. The coquette's indifference strikes directly at the target's vanity and insecurity. Why aren't I good enough? I need to prove myself.
And they envy the coquette's detachment.
They do. They see this narcissistic self-sufficiency as a form of strength, of freedom. They admire it, resent it, and desperately want to conquer it, perhaps hoping some of that perceived power will rub off on them if they succeed.
Next up, the dandy. Ambiguity seems key here.
The dandy seduces through style, mystery, and a refusal to be categorized. Their technique is crafting a unique, often startling physical image. They deliberately play with traditional notions of masculinity and femininity.
Fluid, unpredictable.
Very fluid, unbound by rigid roles. The sources talk about mental transvestism, not literally, but mentally adopting the tastes and sensibilities of the opposite sex to better understand and mirror the target.
How does mirroring work here?
It appeals to the target's narcissism. By understanding and reflecting the target's own aesthetic ideals, or even their hidden psychological landscape, the dandy makes the target feel deeply seen and uniquely appreciated. Everything becomes an aesthetic choice, elevating the interaction.
And the ambiguity itself is attractive.
Immensely, because the dandy cannot be figured out. They're a puzzle. They hint at a kind of freedom from convention that many people secretly crave but are too afraid to pursue themselves.
How does this play out with gender?
For women, particularly, the dandy can be disarming. They might combine a traditionally feminine appreciation for beauty, detail, and emotional nuance with an underlying male coolness or hint of cruelty. This makes them seem both safe confidants and excitingly dangerous partners.
Okay, now the charmer. This one is labeled seduction without sex. How does that work?
The charmer's technique is almost revolutionary in its focus. They deflect all attention away from themselves. Their entire focus is on making the target feel like the center of the universe.
Pure validation.
Pure, unadulterated validation. They create this bundle of comfort, pleasure, and unwavering support. Any potential manipulation is completely masked by this pleasant atmosphere. They aim straight for vanity and self-esteem, constantly affirming the target's worth.
And they avoid conflict.
Ruthlessly. Always lighthearted, agreeable, adaptable, never argumentative. They create an environment where the target feels utterly safe, seen, and appreciated.
How is that sustainable? And why is it seductive?
It's sustained by constant focused attention and mirroring. They make the target feel incredibly good about themselves. This lowers defenses naturally. It strokes that deep-seated narcissism we all have.
And the target gets hooked on that feeling.
They become addicted, dependent on the charmer for that feeling of warmth, validation, and self-worth. It's a powerful, non-sexual form of control.
Interesting. Then we have the natural. tapping into that childhood nostalgia.
Exactly. The natural embodies qualities we associate with childhood: innocence, spontaneity, sincerity, a lack of pretense. Qualities adults often feel they've lost and secretly miss.
So they seem authentic, unguarded.
Yes, they act as an undefensive, open lover, which naturally encourages others to lower their own inhibitions. And crucially, they often play up their vulnerability, their helplessness, maybe even a touch of naivete.
To elicit sympathy, make the target feel needed.
Precisely. It makes the target feel strong, protective, superior. It neutralizes cynicism. People get infected by this helpless delight, this playful spirit. It transports them back to that imagined golden age of simple feelings.
And playing the victim bypasses guilt.
It can. By positioning themselves as the innocent lamb, they cast the target in the role of the kind, protective figure. It gives the target a noble, non-sexual reason to engage and care, breaking down barriers.
Okay, shifting gears now to the archetypes more focused on mass influence. First, the charismatic.
The charismatic is all about projecting energy outwards, an intense inner confidence. Their technique involves radiating self-belief, purpose, often a palpable sexual energy.
The piercing gaze, the air of mystery.
Yes, combined with a certain emotional detachment that makes them seem above the fray. They use powerful, fiery oratory, often laced with vague religious or spiritual undertones.
Tapping into that need for faith or higher meaning.
Exactly, connecting to those deeper, often repressed needs. And they display this uninhibited quality, fearlessness, maybe a dangerous sexuality, which allows followers to project their own hidden desires onto them.
So people believe without needing proof.
That's the core effect. They compel belief through sheer force of personality. They excite people, make them feel more alive, partly by arousing those repressed feelings, creating an almost erotic charge in a crowd.
And followers lose themselves in the cause?
They do. They feel intensely connected, part of something bigger. This leads to a profound, often irrational attachment, very similar to being in love. Total dependency on the leader for meaning.
And finally, the star, the modern version of the distant god or goddess.
In a way, yes. The star is engineered for the age of mass media, feeding that public hunger for escape into dreams. Their technique is projecting a very distinctive, desirable style or image, while remaining personally vague, ethereal, distant.
Keep the real person hidden.
Meticulously. Keep the character elusive. Cultivate what the sources call a blank, mysterious face. This invites interpretation, projection, fantasy. It allows people to imagine more than is there. The star becomes a symbol, a cipher for some social ideal or desire.
This sounds much colder, more manufactured than, say, the ideal lover's intense focus.
It often is. Cold, artificial, deliberately constructed for mass consumption, but incredibly effective.
Why? What's the effect?
It perfectly feeds that constant need to escape dull reality into glamorous dreams. Because they seem dreamlike and distant, stars operate powerfully on the unconscious. The audience becomes obsessed, haunted by their image, treating them almost like objects of worship, filling the void with fantasy.
It's clear this framework isn't just about dating. These archetypes, these strategies, they're absolutely central to mass influence today, aren't they? Politics especially.
Oh, completely. Modern political campaigns are saturated with seduction principles. Candidates have to project charisma, that fascinating energy, just to hold public attention in the noise.
And the sources point to specific examples like JFK. They see him as the ideal lover on a national scale.
Exactly. His appeal wasn't just policy points, it was about tapping into America's lost ideals, that post-war feeling of needing a mission, needing adventure, the new frontier.
He was reflecting back a national yearning, filling a collective void.
Precisely. He appealed to the nation's better self, making the electorate feel inspired, intelligent, part of something grand. It created this incredibly deep emotional attachment to him and his vision.
So it's strategic identity manipulation. Find the dissatisfaction, find the missing piece, and become the embodiment of the solution.
That's the political game. Using contrasts, showing you have what your rivals lack. Stirring up discontent with the present to make your vision of the future irresistible. It's about redefining the collective identity with you at the center.
And that charismatic bond, once formed, is incredibly hard to break with just facts and figures.
Extremely resistant. Because it's emotional. Charismatics thrive on that projected self-belief, that hint of mystery. They make followers feel they need to believe in them, to feel fully alive, connected to something meaningful. It becomes a kind of love affair with the leader.
And it's not just the ideal lover or charismatic archetypes in politics. You mentioned the cold coquette tactic being used. That seems counterintuitive for winning votes.
The sources identify this specifically in modern context. Some political figures, particularly those who inspire almost cult-like devotion, use tactics very similar to the cold coquette.
Meaning maintaining distance, appearing aloof.
Yes, a carefully maintained inward detachment, appearing self-sufficient, maybe even slightly disdainful, while simultaneously whipping up mass excitement through rhetoric or spectacle.
So the distance signals power.
Yeah.
And makes people chase harder.
It taps into the same psychology. That elusiveness, that air of "I don't need your approval," paradoxically makes the public and the media pursue them more intensely, desperate for a sign of recognition, trying to figure them out.
It keeps them constantly in the spotlight.
Which, in today's media environment, is the ultimate currency. It's the same mechanism as personal seduction, just amplified to a mass scale. Being aloof forces pursuit and commands attention.
When you lay it all out like this, it really feels like the core strategy hasn't changed much over thousands of years.
The tools change, the stage changes, but the underlying principles are remarkably consistent. The soft sell dominates now, subtle influence over brute force. But whether it's an ancient courtier, a rake with words, or a modern politician using mass media,
it always comes back to engaging fantasies, stirring up desire.
and fundamentally clouding reason, it all serves that original Latin meaning, to lead astray.
Okay, let's try to wrap this up. We've covered a huge amount of ground today. If we boil it down, what are the absolute key takeaways?
First, I'd say seduction isn't really about looks or natural charm. It's a game, a calculated game of psychology and strategy.
It's deliberate, premeditated.
Yes. Second, its power comes entirely from tapping into universal human vulnerabilities. That feeling of incompleteness, the fragile ego, those shattered dreams, the deep desire for escape, and maybe even a little transgression.
Seducers don't create the weakness, they find it and exploit it.
Precisely. And third, those 9 archetypes. They demonstrate that success isn't random. It requires planning, emotional intelligence, and a laser focus on the target's specific psychological needs.
You have to know which gap you're promising to fill.
Exactly. The most powerful seducer is simply the most convincing mirror. They reflect the target's deepest, often unacknowledged, desires back at them,
Making themselves seem like the only possible path to feeling whole.
making themselves seem indispensable.
So as we finish this deep dive, here's something for you, our listeners, to think about based on everything we've discussed. If all these strategies, from the Siren's allure to the Charismatic's promise of purpose, are designed to fill a psychological gap, what specific common desire or need, maybe one that's particularly unfulfilled by our modern, fast-paced, tech-heavy, often isolating society, is the most potent vulnerability for seducers and influencers to target today? What's the biggest gap waiting to be filled right now?